Then we'll adjust those comments and bring it back for approval, and then submit it to the BCOE on June 27th. To inform this, we have to get stakeholder input. So we've done surveys, we're using the Thrive data. Any meeting that we attend and we receive input, we document those. We've had an LCAP meeting by Zoom already. We'll have one in person on April 3rd in this room, transportation conference room at 5 o'clock. It'll be in person. But we've put LCAP surveys out, and we'll take them down March 24th, and then we'll bring you the comments. But so far, we've sent 1 million surveys out, and we have 93 respondents of parents, 24 community members, 148 student, and 39 staff. So what we'll do is we'll take the list of all the comments. I've already been reading them and started a common thread of what people are saying. And then we'll use those to target actions as we go through. And so some of the ones we're seeing so far is continue with the SROs. So we have a contract that we'll bring to you in April with Oroville Police Department for 3 years to provide SRO services. And then we're working with the county to get a full-time deputy. Right now we have a part-time deputy, but they think they can provide full-time services next year. So we're working on getting that contract, and we'll bring that to you. And so that's all I have on superintendent report.
Electronic one will. Oh, I got it. The link on the electronic version of the agenda links to the documents that I'm referencing right here, and so basically, the PLC process should address the 4 basic questions that we ask about instructional programming. The first question is, what do we want students to know or be able to do? Second, how will we know if each student has learned it? Third, how will we respond if they don't learn it? And fourth, how will we extend learning for kids that are demonstrating mastery? And so the staff was polled to determine, to give their opinion on to what extent they felt like we had these things in place. So under each one of those defining questions, there are certain things that fit under there that work towards defining those things. And so if you look at the first box, which is what do we want students to know or be able to do, some foundational pieces in there are have we identified essential standards that we are going to teach? Have we determined what success looks like and mastery looks like? Have we developed scope and sequences in our curriculums and courses? Have we developed unit plans? Have we developed SMART goals and learning targets? All these things are pretty foundational pieces when it comes to instructional programming. And so as you can see from the numbers there, a level 4 means that we're at a great extent. So we're pretty confident that we have that in all subject areas, the courses that we teach. A 5 means it's completely done. 3 means we do or we don't. It's kind of a 50-50 process. So if you look at this, the majority of these foundational pieces are hovering around the 3 to 3.5 mark, which means we have some that are there and some that aren't. And so we have some work to do. And it's pretty similar to that in the rest of the different questions. So like, how will we know if each student has learned it? This is basically focusing on assessment. How are we using assessment to drive instructional planning? A lot of these things are under 3. So we really don't have a lot of confidence in our assessment programs in each course. We're below the 50-50 mark. How do we respond when kids don't learn it? We're way below the 50-50 mark. So we don't have confidence in our intervention process with kids that aren't learning. And then how do we extend it? So how do we, those kids that are flying, how do we keep them flying? How do we keep them going? We really don't have the confidence in ours, and this is the perception of the staff members. And so what we intend to do with this information is we're going to start tackling these pieces little by little. And this will be things that we focus on over the course of the next several years. This isn't going to be something we'll fix between now and the end of the school year. And so I've already met with Las Plumas and their subject area coordinator team. I'm meeting with Oroville High next week and their team. And I've sent this information out to them, and I've also disaggregated the information out by subject area. And so English has theirs, math has theirs, so they can see their individual content areas and where they fall as a content area. Some are better than others. Some have more work in some areas than others. And so when I sent this out, I laid out my thoughts of a plan moving forward of what we should do. The initial tendency of people is, well, we've got to do work in all four of these. We've got to just get it all fixed right now. That's not sustainable, and it becomes overwhelming. And so we're going to focus on box number one, which, yep. And so box number one, we're going to focus on those because those are kind of the foundational pieces. And if you don't have if we don't have identified what we want them to know or understand or be able to do, then the rest of it doesn't matter, because assessment are built off of those things. Interventions are built off of those things. Extensions are built off of those. So if you don't have those things in place to a point where we're confident in those things, then we can't move on to the other things and successfully implement things. Absolutely. And so that's what started kind of this whole thought process in my brain, is this notion of the portrait of a graduate, and what to be able to get kids to attain all those bullet points that we've identified in that portrait. We've got to solidify our foundational practices. And so we're going to focus on this group. So what I have the subject areas doing now is they're working with their teams to develop a quick win, something they can do between now and the end of the school year to boost the items in this first box. So if they need to look at standards, they're going to take some time to look at standards. We have some funding, some one-time funding and other things that are available, so we can provide time for teachers. We can provide subs. So if we want to do some cross-school work between Oroville and LP, so we have a united program, we can pay for subs to work and do some of that cross-school work. We have time for summer. We're structuring our summer professional development around these types of things, so that now not only do they have time, but they have support in their training and professional development as well. And so that's kind of the overall in terms of just the numbers. And then if you look at the next page, I also asked them where they felt they needed the most training. Yeah, Bonnie. So basically what they're saying, less preps means you might have a teacher that teaches English 9, English 10, and English 11, for example. I don't think that happens, but maybe so that each one of those is considered a prep. And so what they're saying is rather than have more than one prep that they're preparing for, limit that so they can really focus in on the ones they have, instead of being spread thin over multiple subject areas. You see this in math. You see this especially like in social science. You'll have 3 or 4 different preps that you're preparing for. And so you can't focus the majority of your energy on. Yeah. So you have like an English 9 core group, so that you have maybe 2 teachers that have split all of the English 9 versus having that split between 3 or 4 different teachers. You can really control and dial in some of the focus when you do that. And so when you look at the training needs, obviously it aligned with the data. One of the biggest ones they wanted training on was assessment, development, and practices. And if you look back at the box number 2, we're really low on that. And so they see that need for assessment training, PLC roles and responsibilities, and using data to plan for instruction. So all the things are pretty core to this process, and they've identified that those are the training things that they would like to see. So we'll build our professional development plan around those things as well. And then the last one, the 3 boxes, define the plate, the stumbling blocks, and the first things first. This was to get their ideas of what they thought we needed to be. So this isn't necessarily my ideas, but this is their thoughts that we're building off of. And so defining the plate, what we've heard in a lot of discussions is that teachers they've got a lot to do. And so I just thought I'd ask them, what do you think should be on that plate? What do we think we should do? Or how can we help so that we can maximize the plate you have? And you can see those things that are on there. I found it interesting that the bulk of their wish lists surrounded admin support and expertise, asking for accountability, asking for follow-through, clear and consistent programs and practices, and then purposeful PD, professional development that aligns with what we're actually doing versus just one-off stuff that really doesn't have a bearing on what we're trying to accomplish. They're asking for more collaboration time, a way we can get teachers together more often to collaborate on instructional practice. And so one of the things that I live by is the notion that if you can predict it, you can prevent it. And so I wanted them to share with me what they thought roadblocks were, stumbling blocks were, so you could see what they thought was. Time is always going to be number one, and that was across just about every response. An interesting one was there was quite a few responses with traditional grading system can be inequitable, compliance versus mastery. So an interest in looking at things like a standards-based model or something like that that grades on mastery of subject versus did I just turn in my homework today, with a focus that the stuff that we do actually contributes to learning, not just compliance in general. Looking at master schedules and calendars to have those things support what we're doing. Making the scope manageable, so small chunks versus trying to tackle the whole elephant in one shot. Low staff morale was brought up multiple times, and a variety of other different things. Behavior issues, safety was another one that came in. And then finally, just some ideas of first things first. Where would they start? If they were sitting in the seat, where would they start? Identifying the purpose and the why, and I think we're accomplishing that through our Thrive process, trying to develop that why. Common preps, add minimum days for possible cross-school collaboration, trainings, building leadership capacity at all levels, the district, the school level, and the content team level, making that collaboration time sacred, so really limiting the interruptions that happen with that teacher collaboration time. Smaller core teams, increased accountability and follow-through, organize the process, so common processes across the district, common forms, common things to alleviate some of the confusion that happens because schools tend to do things a little bit differently. So finding ways we can unify those processes, and then create some sort of a teacher staff guiding council to help lead the change so that they have a continuing voice in that process. And so we're looking to identify those things that we can start, and I'm using the subject area coordinating teams at both schools, the comp schools, to help me drive that process. I don't want to be the one that dictates everything. I want them to have some ownership in this so that the buy-in increases. And so the groups are working together right now to deliver me a plan, what they plan to do in their content area and what their deliverable is between now and the start of next school year. And so I should have those in the next couple of weeks. So any questions? A singleton, so they don't necessarily have, so like you have the English language arts group, they all teach English. But what about the ceramics teacher? Where do they fit? They're kind of their own thing. They're a single content area. Ceramics has their own thing. They don't really have another teacher to collaborate with that also does ceramics. So band, art, Chef B, culinary. And so that will work. See if we can't get some cross-school collaboration so those singletons can work together across schools.
So we have our DOJ monitor will be in the district on March 31st. He will do site visits, and then he'll hold office hours for anyone that wants to come talk to him. at the end of the day, probably about 2:15 on Friday the 31st. And then DOJ will be in Oroville City and OUHSD, April 19th through the 21st. They're going to do all day in Oroville City and the morning of the 20th in Oroville City, and then the afternoon of the 20th, they're coming to one of the Oroville high schools. We don't know if it's going to be Prospect or Oroville High or Las Plumas, and then they'll spend the whole day here on Friday the 21st. Right, this is after spring break.
Yeah.
Right. And then one of our deliverables is we have to do a community bulletin that is in English, Hmong, and Spanish. We're working on wrapping that up. We had to go back and forth with the Department of Justice on numbers and content. And so we will have that out. And then so we should be in good shape with our deliverables for this point of the year. Because every month we have to submit different things. And then they'll send me a list and say, you need more documents translated, etc. So that's how we're working with the DOJ. Any questions? All right.
Okay, the second interim report is a snapshot of our financial activity as of January 31st. Since we have the big packet electronically now, I just printed out the general fund and the multi-year projection for discussion purposes. Well, and I thought I had one for you too, but so once we took our CBEDS count in October, we ended up with 2,347 students, which is down 87 students from the year before. ADA is at 1,987. I had to make a negative adjustment to the LCFF calculation. Our percentage of P2 ADA to CBEDS enrollment normally is about 90%. And since COVID, attendance has not been as good as it used to be historically. And so it is trending at 84%. So that, less ADA means less money. And so I decreased the LCFF estimate to reflect that. Some of the changes to revenue is we increased the ESSER funding. We're trying to spend as much of it as we can, and we have to match the revenues to the expenditures, and so that increased the federal revenue amounts. We also added the bus replacement grant for an electric bus. We included an ethnic studies grant, a BCOE technology grant of $40,000, and a North Valley Community Fund grant to Prospect High School for $10,000. Expenses were adjusted to reflect the tentative agreements that you're asked to approve tonight. So that those are increases in salaries and benefits, with an additional teacher added at Prospect for English and a targeted case manager at Prospect also. We added Chromebooks that we used SPED money or special education money to purchase. Cameras for buses that we used one-time money for. We increased the estimate of our legal expenses this year. And then we added contracts for staffing, a staffing search, network administration, contracted paraeducators, the Thrive study, and a part-time SRO at Las Plumas. And we also added the electric bus that we had gotten the grant for. For adult ed and cafeteria, the main adjustments for those two funds were negotiations, so the salary and benefits increased in both those funds. And if you turn it over, it's the projected multi-year projection. The first page is unrestricted. I want to go back. I'm estimating that we'll end the year with 16.5 million. Some of that is restricted, you can see, for grants and scholarships. And that's just money that we don't think we're going to spend by the end of the year. Some of these, like the Expanded Learning Opportunity Grant, has to be spent by the end of next year. We have some money assigned for vehicle replacement and stadium lighting project. And then our unassigned, we have to set aside 1.3 million. The 3% is required by the state. And then our board policy adds another 14% of that. So that's another 6 million. And that leaves a designated balance of 6.8 million. Multi-year projection. So those are, we use facts that we know today. Many of those will change by the time we get to the 2 subsequent years. But based on the information that we know now, we would be able, you can see we have positive fund balances. The increases are the result. You know, many things will change. We'll have agreements, negotiated agreements with our groups, those kind of things. So those should, those balances will go down. But what it's meant to show is that we'd be able to meet our obligations for this year and the next 2 years. For Thrive. Corey, have they?
We have not negotiated
for next year. Okay.
They want to finish this year first. Right, and I've already talked to them about that. They just want to see what the next steps are first. Okay.
It is. It's similar to what we've had since we've come back from COVID. The students aren't quite as good at coming to school or quite as engaged as they were before. We were hitting 90% pretty consistently.
Sorry about that. I should have got a recommendation or certification. Do I have a motion? All in favor? Opposed? Certification. Item 21. Dr. Watt.
So we're bringing to you a proposed increase of 9.89% to the salary schedule for the certificated administrative group. The cost of the increase is $169,545 and is retroactive back to July 1st. 157 of that will be paid from unrestricted funds, and about 13,000 will be paid from Title I and adult ed funding. So we have some multi-funded positions, and the group has no increase to their health insurance contribution. So the salary schedule is in the packet.
That is recommended for approval. Second. Comments or questions?
So again,
The principals, assistant principals, the psychologists, director of ed.
All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Item 22. 9.5 salary schedule for the confidential supervisory group.
So we're proposing a 9.5% salary schedule for the confidential supervisory group. Confidential is mainly the people that you see working at the district office. And then supervisory would be Jackie in food service, Jim LaGrone, and John Casalong in maintenance, our facility director and assistant director of facilities and technology and transportation. So the total cost for that increase is $93,524 and is retro back to 7/1/22. 84,000 of that would be paid out of unrestricted funds, with $9,000 to be paid out of the cafeteria fund. The group also increased the salary schedule for the educational services technician by adding $1.09 to each cell on the salary schedule. So that equated to a 0.39% of the increase, which resulted in a 95% on the salary schedule. And their health insurance contributions remain status quo.
Recommendation for approval, I have a motion.
So moved.
And a second. Comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 23, approval of tentative agreement with OUHSD dated February 13th.
So the tentative agreement with OSTA includes an 8.33% increase to the salary schedule, retroactive back to 7/1/22, a 3.25% increase in the extra duty salary schedule, as well as the addition of 16 stipends for class advisors and an increase to the extra duty stipend multiplier. The agreement was also reached to change the method of calculating extended illness leave so that bargaining unit members receive 50% or more of their regular salary. The total cost of this agreement was $1,274,469. $1.2 million of this will be paid with unrestricted funds, with the remaining being covered by categorical funding.
Recommendation for approval. Comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So we're seeking approval of a 9.89 salary increase for the Assistant Superintendent CBO. The cost of this increase to the salary is $22,028. Will be paid from unrestricted funds retroactive to 7/1/22, and she is elected to keep her insurance contribution status quo. Five, approval of a 9.89 salary increase for the superintendent. Dr. Watt.
So we're proposing a 9.89% salary schedule increase for the superintendent. The cost of the agreement is $22,618 and will be paid from unrestricted funds. As retroactive back to 7/1/22, he is elected to keep his insurance contribution status quo.
Recommendation. So the district solicited stakeholder input by surveying students, staff, parents, guardians, and the community, speaking to school staff to develop priorities and holding a public hearing at the February 15th board meeting in the development of our arts and music block grant plan. The revised allocation is estimated to be $893,688, and we're recommending approval. Comments or questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Item 27, 2-year. So we're required to do a yearly transportation plan, but the first one is 2 years. And the district solicited stakeholder input by surveying students, staff, parents, guardians, and the community, speaking to the transportation staff, and holding a public hearing at the February 15th board meeting. The plan reflects the current district practices and how students with disabilities, low income, foster youth, and homeless students will have access to home to school transportation at no cost to the student.
So the district's a member of the Butte School Self-Funded Program, JPA, for employee benefits, property and liability, and a workers' compensation program. You previously approved a new agreement for participation, but we now have an amended JPA agreement, and it just has some minor changes and updated language for equal employment opportunities. Each member must now approve the amended joint powers agreement. Recommendation. Mhm.
Dr. Collins is requesting approval to attend the AXA North State Spring Conference, Equity in Education in Reno, Nevada on April 28th and 29th. All expenses will be paid by site admin funds.
I make a motion that motion case 13-2223 be expelled for the remainder of the 22-23 school year and the first semester of the 23-24 school year, and said expulsion be suspended. Be returned to Los Angeles High School to continue their education as set forth in the student stipulated expulsion agreement and rehabilitation plan dated and executed on February 10, 2023. Does that mean this person is expelled for the remainder of this year and the first semester of next year, and then he returns to Orville, Los Angeles? Oh, I make a motion that expulsion case 4. Oh, I make a motion that expulsion case 14-2223 be expelled for the remainder of the 22-23 school year and the first semester of the 23-24 school year. Be referred to community day school to continue their education. So that means he's going now to community day school. I just want to understand. I make a motion that expulsion case 15-2223 be expelled for the remainder of the 22-23 school year and the first semester of the 23-24 school year. Be referred to community day school to continue their education. Aye.
So we're going to be bringing a SRO contract for Orville Police. We will be bringing LCAP survey comments so that you can review those before we bring a draft LCAP to you. I think he overstepped what he was taught because we don't know the funding source he's quoting if he can do it. And so there's a lot of things that have to happen before we do that. Yes. So he cited one funding source, and Susan and I don't think we can do it with that funding source. And so we're going to have to work with the principal to see exactly what he is planning. So I think he jumped a couple of steps coming to you guys first. So you could see that in April. It just depends on where we get. We can look into that. We have a contract, and so we're supposed to have coverage, but they,
Coverage in the office and then the person goes out if there's a problem, or are they supposed to be around?
they both, sometimes they're held in the office, but they're also responsible for Prospect and Community Day School as well. So
This is the time they were on the West County.
I'll have to look into it.
I don't know if that's true. I'm just telling you when more than one person says something.
We'll look into it.